Gaslighting meets reality check. In this Savage Endings compilation, every accusation of being too sensitive gets flipped, with receipts. When everyone finally sees the truth, the silence, deafening. This is, he said I was overreacting, until everyone saw it.
She said I was too emotional for the job, so I took her clients. You're just a little too emotional for this role. That's what Vanessa told me. Right after I found out I'd been passed over for a promotion I earned with my whole heart, my whole soul, and honestly, my entire life for the past year. Too emotional? That's funny, because I wasn't emotional when I stayed late to fix her mistakes. I wasn't emotional when I managed the impossible deadlines she promised without checking with me. And I definitely wasn't emotional when her favorite client called me their lifeline. But sure, let's blame my feelings. Let's blame my empathy. Let's blame the fact that I actually cared about the people I worked with, clients included. Funny thing though, empathy? It builds loyalty. And while Vanessa sat up in her glass office thinking that emotional meant weak, I built something she didn't even realize she was losing. Trust, respect, relationships, with every single client that mattered most. So when I left, I didn't have to steal her clients. I didn't have to poach them. I didn't have to beg. They followed me, willingly, quietly. And Vanessa? Vanessa was left sitting at her desk wondering why nobody was returning her calls anymore. My name's Erin, Client Success Manager at one of those sleek, trendy marketing firms that talks a big game about culture but burns through people like printer paper. And me, I was one of the good ones. Hardworking, consistent, quiet, but not because I didn't have ideas. Quiet because I knew how offices like this worked. You keep your head down, you handle your business, and eventually, good things come. At least, that's what I believed for a long time. Vanessa? She was my boss, Director of Client Relations. The queen of smiling in your face while twisting the knife behind your back. Polished, perfectly dressed. The kind of woman who turned compliments into weapons. You're such a hard worker, Erin. I just worry you take things too personally. Translation? You're doing all the work, but you'll never sit at my table. I stayed late without complaining. Cleaned up client messes she caused. Jumped in when she forgot to reply to important emails. And the clients loved me for it. They didn't see Vanessa at 7 p.m. when there was a crisis. They saw me. Me, pulling strategy out of thin air. Me, walking nervous clients back from the ledge. Me, staying calm while Vanessa circulated at networking events for Instagram clout. I wasn't flashy. Wasn't political. Didn't care about being the loudest voice in the room. I cared about doing the job right. About people. About relationships. About building trust the slow, quiet, real way. And for a while, it worked. Until I dared to ask for a promotion. Until I dared to want more. Until I dared to step out of the quiet corner Vanessa liked keeping me in. And that was when I saw her true colors. Because nothing scares a mediocre boss more than a quiet woman ready to own her power. Before I knew, I thought Vanessa respected me. Not admired me. That's not how people like her operate. But respected me? Sure. I handled the messy clients. I handled the difficult projects. I handled the impossible deadlines she promised without checking with me first. And every time I pulled it off, she smiled that tight little corporate smile. What would I do without you, Erin? Spoiler alert, she was about to find out. For a while I was content, building client relationships, learning their businesses like they were my own, being the person they called, not Vanessa, when something really mattered. I was never chasing clout, never chasing titles, never chasing attention, but what I was building was trust. The kind of trust Vanessa didn't even realize she was losing. Because while she was busy collecting LinkedIn followers, I was collecting loyalty, client by client, email by email, call by call. And it wasn't just work calls either. It was, hey Erin, my kid's sick, can we move our strategy meeting? Of course. Erin, I'm really struggling with this rollout. I trust your input more than anyone. No problem. You just get us. That's what one of our biggest accounts said to me once. Simple, but it stuck. That's the thing about empathy. Real empathy. It makes people feel safe. Heard. Understood. Not a line in a brochure. Not a corporate catchphrase. Real. Vanessa didn't have that. Never did. She had strategy decks and networking charm. But when it came down to trust, she was empty. She just didn't know it yet. And me? I wasn't chasing her job. Wasn't plotting against her. Wasn't looking to leave. But the second she decided to turn on me, To label my biggest strength as my weakness? She didn't just push me away. She pushed her clients away too. She just didn't see it coming. Not yet. The first red flag was subtle, like most corporate betrayals are. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was strategic. It started after I casually mentioned I was thinking about applying for the open senior manager role. Nothing bold. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet, hopeful, I think I'm ready. Vanessa smiled that polite, cold smile. Of course, Aaron. Happy to support you in that process. Translation? Not a chance. A week later, meetings I usually led, gone from my calendar. Clients I had daily contact with, suddenly funneled through Vanessa. We just want to give you some breathing room, she said. Breathing room? Girl, I was thriving, not drowning. Red flag number 2. That little line she slipped into my performance review. Sometimes Erin can be a little too emotionally invested in her clients. Emotionally invested? Is that what we're calling giving a damn now? Because let's be real. That's why clients stayed. That's why renewals happened. That's why they asked for me by name. Red flag number 3? The whisper campaign. Subtle little comments floating around the office. Vanessa's concerned Erin might not have the executive presence for the next level. Executive presence. Corporate code for. Too real to fake it. And the final flag. An email forwarded to me by mistake from a junior team member. Vanessa's words. Erin's great with clients, but I just don't think she's leadership material. She's too emotional. Takes things personally. We need someone with a little more distance. More distance? Cool. I could give her all the distance in the world. Because what Vanessa didn't realize was that empathy isn't a weakness. It's a weapon. And if she wanted me out of the room, fine. I'd take the clients with me. Not by stealing. Not by scheming. By simply showing them what leadership really looks like. After that email, everything about the way I saw Vanessa changed. I wasn't hurt anymore. I wasn't surprised. I was focused. Because now I knew exactly what kind of game I was playing. And if Vanessa wanted distance, she was about to get it. But not the way she thought. She kept moving fast, reassigning my accounts, looping herself into client calls she used to ignore, positioning me like an assistant, not a strategist. And all the while, she kept smiling in my face. I just want to help you grow, Erin. Help me grow. Sis, you're pruning me like dead leaves. But here's where Vanessa really messed up. Clients noticed. Immediately. Because here's the thing about people. They know when energy shifts. They know when you're avoiding them. They know when their trusted person, their go-to, is suddenly missing from the conversation. Calls that used to feel natural, now stiff. Emails that used to be warm, now cold. One client, a huge account, even said, "Where's Erin? We're used to her handling things." Vanessa smiled. "Oh, Erin's just focusing on other priorities now." Funny, because my priority was watching Vanessa dig her own grave. I didn't need to badmouth her. Didn't need to warn anyone. All I did, stay calm, stay gracious. Handled every client interaction I still had with excellence. Built trust like always. Quiet, steady, unshakable. Meanwhile, Vanessa thought she was winning. Thought she was icing me out. Thought she was clearing her path to be the star. And me, I was planning my exit. Not just from the company, but from her entire shadow. Because when I left, it wasn't just going to be me walking out the door. It was going to be every relationship she took for granted. Walking right behind me. I didn't rush my exit. That's the difference between petty revenge and real revenge. Petty revenge is loud. Real revenge moves in silence. I started preparing like I was moving out of a bad apartment. Slow, careful, leaving nothing behind but dust. Step 1, documentation. I backed up every client email where they praised my work. Every renewal report with my name attached. Every message from Vanessa that showed she was icing me out. Not because I wasn't performing, but because I cared too much. Empathy was my crime, apparently. Cool. Let the record show. Step 2, relationship building, quietly. Coffee chats. Final check-ins. Soft little phrases like, "Just wanted to say how much I've appreciated working with you over the years." Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming. Just planting seeds. And trust me, clients pick up on energy real quick. Especially when the person who's been in the trenches with them starts sounding like goodbye. Step 3, my own escape plan. I wasn't walking into another corporate cage. I started networking quietly. Consulting opportunities. Freelance projects. Anything that would let me take what I built and leave the politics behind. And wouldn't you know it, Every single person I reached out to said the same thing. Aaron, if you ever leave, please let us know where you land. Music to my ears. Because Vanessa might have controlled my title, but she never controlled my value. The final straw. A client I'd worked with for years sent me a direct message. Simple. Hey, are you okay? Things feel different lately. Just wanted to say, you've been the heart of this project for us. And that was all I needed. Proof that my work spoke louder than any promotion. Proof that people saw me. Proof that when I left, I wouldn't be leaving alone. I'd be leaving with something Vanessa couldn't steal. Respect. Trust. And in this business, that's everything. The day I gave my notice, I was calm, quiet, unbothered. Exactly the way revenge should feel. I booked a short meeting with Vanessa. No subject line drama. No warning signs. Just a polite little, "Hey, do you have a quick minute to chat?" She smiled like she always did, tight, practiced, corporate perfect. "Of course, Aaron. What's up?" "Oh, girl. Everything." I kept it simple. "I've accepted another opportunity. My last day will be 2 weeks from today." The pause was delicious. She wasn't expecting it. Not from me. Not from her quiet, too emotional little employee. She blinked. Once. Then twice. "Oh, wow. I didn't realize you were looking." Of course she didn't. Because people like Vanessa think the ones they underestimate will always stay put. Spoiler alert, we never do. She tried to recover. "Where are you going?" "Doing what?" I smiled. "Just moving on to something that aligns better with how I like to work." Translation? Away from you. But the real beauty came in the days that followed. That's when the calls started. Not to me. To her. Clients finding out. Clients not thrilled. Clients asking questions like, "Will Erin still be on our account? Who's replacing her? Can we follow her to her new firm?" Vanessa's nightmare was coming true. Not because I stole anything. Not because I badmouthed her. But because when you build real relationships, people follow you. Not the company. Not the brand. You. By the time my last day rolled around, Vanessa was scrambling, firing off emails, setting up transition calls. And me, packing up my little desk, smiling, because she thought calling me emotional would break me. Turns out, it built me into someone she could never replace. After I left, it didn't take long for things to fall apart. Quietly. Perfectly. Exactly how I planned. See, Vanessa thought clients were loyal to logos, to contracts, to company names stamped on slick presentations. But clients are loyal to people. The ones who show up for them when everything goes sideways. The ones who know their business like it's personal. The ones who answer emails at 7 a.m. without an ounce of attitude. People like me, not people like her. The first call I got, from a client I'd worked with for years. "Hey, just wanted to check in. We'd love to stay in touch. If you're ever available for consulting work, please call us first." The second message? Similar. The third? Even better. "Vanessa told us you'd moved on. Honestly? Good for you. Just let us know where you land." Meanwhile, Vanessa was over there scrambling, spinning stories, trying to slap together fake enthusiasm about new account managers who didn't know these clients from a stranger on the street. And you know what happened next? Clients started walking. Slow at first. One here, one there, until it became a pattern. A client I once saved from a huge crisis sent me an email I'll never forget. "Vanessa said you were too emotional for the job." Then right underneath it? "Funny, turns out that was exactly what we needed." Phew. Say less. The company tried to recover, tried to restructure, tried to beg people to stay. But once trust is gone, it's gone. Doesn't matter how many team retreats or polished apology emails you send. People remember who showed up for them. They remember who cared. They remember who made them feel seen. And me, I wasn't bragging. Wasn't posting online about it. Wasn't rubbing anything in Vanessa's face. I didn't need to. The results spoke for themselves. Every lost contract? Every client gone silent on her? That was louder than anything I could have ever said. My strategy after leaving? Simple. Quiet moves. Loud results. I didn't blast my story all over social media. Didn't trash talk Vanessa. Didn't post some passive-aggressive quote about knowing your worth. I didn't need to, because when you leave right, the story tells itself. I focused on me. Started my own consulting work. Small projects at first. Referrals from old clients. But the best part? I never chased them. They came to me. "We don't want another big agency feel. We want you. You always understood our business better than anyone." Let us know what it would take to work with you directly. Vanessa? She must have been furious. But the thing about burning bridges? You better make sure the person you're burning is still standing on it. Because I was already on solid ground. Free. Clear. Untouchable. Word travels fast in our industry. Every time a client left her, somebody would send me a little message like, "Guess who's calling us about re-signing now that you're gone?" Spoiler alert, it wasn't working. Because loyalty can't be faked. And once people lose trust, no amount of polished client decks can save you. Meanwhile, I built slow, intentional, real relationships. I worked with people who valued empathy, who valued partnership, who valued me, not just my work. And the money, it came. The peace, priceless. The respect, unshakable. Vanessa thought I was too emotional for the job. Turns out, clients like emotional. They like real. They like human. And that was something she would never understand. Because while she was busy managing accounts, I was managing relationships. And in this game, that's what wins every time. I didn't need revenge to look loud. I didn't need it to look messy. I needed it to look like peace. And that's exactly what my life started to look like. New clients, new projects, new energy, clients who respected boundaries, clients who valued partnership, clients who paid without hesitation because they trusted the work. And all without a single cold call, without a single pitch deck, without begging anyone to stay. Meanwhile, Vanessa's name stayed in rotation, but not in the way she wanted. People talked, not because I said a word, but because bad leadership always reveals itself eventually. Vanessa's team turnover is wild lately. They lost another account last month. Feels like things aren't the same since Aaron left. That last one, sent to me by a former coworker with laughing emojis attached. I didn't gloat, didn't screenshot it for the group chat, didn't need to, because I was busy, booked, and unbothered. My favorite moment? One of her old clients, one of the ones she practically ignored until it was too late, reached out to me directly. "Hey Aaron, we've got a new project coming up. Would love to work with you again." Vanessa's firm just isn't the same. No shade needed, no drama needed, just proof that real relationships outlive company politics every time. Vanessa thought she took everything from me when she froze me out of that promotion. She thought calling me too emotional would keep me small. She thought she won. But here I was, working for myself, working on my terms, respected, paid, happy. She built her career pretending to be untouchable. I built mine being human. Guess which one lasted? After I left Vanessa's company, my entire world slowed down, in the best possible way. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't overnight. It just settled. I remember waking up that first Monday morning after leaving. No alarms blaring, no pit in my stomach, no fake corporate smile to put on. Just me. Just quiet. For the first time in a long time, I realized how much noise I'd been living with. Not the noise of phones ringing or clients emailing. I loved that part. It was the noise in my head. The constant second-guessing. The fear of being too much or too emotional or too invested. Vanessa had taught me that caring too deeply could be seen as a weakness. But my clients? They taught me the opposite. Little by little, they started reaching out. Not because I asked. Not because I begged. But because they wanted to. "Hey Aaron, I heard you're consulting now. Let us know if you're available. We really miss working with you. Nobody handled things like you did." Those messages didn't just fill my inbox. They filled something else I didn't even realize had been empty for so long. My confidence. Work didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like purpose. Every project I took on reminded me of what Vanessa never understood. People don't leave great companies, they leave bad leaders. And sometimes, clients do too. I started working with smaller teams who respected me. Clients who valued clear communication. People who didn't care if I was too emotional. They cared that I was honest, invested, and damn good at what I did. The best part wasn't the projects. It wasn't even the money. It was logging off at the end of the day and feeling like I didn't have to recover from work anymore. That was my peace. That was my win. And Vanessa? She could keep her executive presence. I had something she would never understand. Real presence. With real people. In a career I built on trust, not fear. Sometimes, I wonder if Vanessa ever figured it out. If she ever sat at her desk, staring at another client email gone cold, and realized it wasn't about me being too emotional. It was about me being real. That's what they followed. That's what she could never fake. Because in the end, reputation might get you in the door, But relationships are what keep people there. And I built mine one conversation at a time. One late-night strategy session. One early morning problem solved. One real connection after another. Vanessa thought calling me too emotional would keep me small. But she didn't shrink me. She sharpened me. She showed me exactly who I didn't want to be. And sometimes, that's the greatest lesson a bad boss can give you. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't blow things up. I didn't steal anything. I left quietly. And when I walked out, everything that mattered came with me. Respect, trust, loyalty, things she never understood, things she never earned. Now, I work with people who value empathy, clients who understand that caring isn't a flaw. It's the reason we win together. And me, I'm still exactly who I've always been. Emotional, empathetic, unapologetic. Turns out, that was never my weakness. That was always my superpower. They told everyone I was crazy, so I made sure they saw the truth. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly get called crazy. It doesn't happen like that. It starts quietly. People who once smiled at you start hesitating when you walk into a room. Friends you've laughed with for years suddenly keep their distance. Family starts asking if you're okay. Not because they care, but because they've already been told you aren't. And before you know it, there's this version of you floating around, built out of whispers and twisted stories. And it doesn't matter who you really are anymore. Because people believe what they want to believe. Especially when the person feeding them the story is charming enough. Especially when they want the story to be true. And me, that's exactly where I found myself. The crazy one. The overreactor. The jealous girlfriend. The girl who, apparently, couldn't keep it together. It didn't matter that I'd spent months feeling like something in my life was off. It didn't matter that I'd started questioning things because I was noticing real patterns, real lies, and not some wild imagination. All anyone saw was what Marcus wanted them to see. Sweet, calm, patient Marcus, the man who told everyone he just wanted peace while quietly painting me as the problem. And for a while I stayed quiet. I swallowed it. Tried to explain myself to people who weren't listening. Tried to defend myself against stories I didn't even know were being told until they'd already made their rounds. But what nobody realized, not Marcus, not his friends, not even my own family, was that I wasn't crazy. I was tired. And there's a big difference between a woman losing her mind and a woman finally deciding to show everyone exactly who they're dealing with. I've never been the type of woman to chase drama. If anything, I spent most of my life avoiding it. I've always been the quiet one, the one who listens more than she talks, the one who keeps her circle small, the one people come to when they need calm instead of chaos. I'm not perfect. I'll never claim that. But crazy? That's never been me. What I am is loyal. Maybe to a fault. I give people the benefit of the doubt until they give me a reason not to. I like routine. I like peace. I like knowing the people in my life mean what they say. And for a long time, I thought Marcus was one of those people. We met through mutual friends. He was funny without trying too hard, patient without being passive. The kind of guy who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't arrogant. He just seemed real. And after a few years of watching friends navigate messy relationships and constant games, real felt rare. So when he wanted to take things slow, I didn't question it. When he wanted time to himself, I respected it. When he wasn't big on social media or sharing every detail of our life online, I didn't see that as a red flag. I thought that's what healthy adults did. They communicated. They gave each other space. They trusted without needing proof every 5 minutes. But what I didn't realize at the time, what I wouldn't learn until much later, was that trust only works when both people are playing by the same rules. And Marcus? He'd been playing a very different game from the start. In the beginning, Marcus made it easy to trust him. He was steady in a way I hadn't experienced before. He wasn't chasing attention. He wasn't juggling exes or playing hot and cold. He showed up on time. He remembered things I said in passing. He knew when to give me space and when to lean in closer. He was the first person in a long time who made me feel like I could breathe. I remember thinking, finally someone who didn't need to be convinced I was worth their time. Finally someone who wasn't constantly comparing me to the last girl or treating me like a placeholder until something better came along. He was good at being exactly what I needed, when I needed it. Looking back now, I realize that's because he was paying attention. Not in a caring way, but in a calculating one. He was learning how I moved, what I responded to, what made me feel safe. And he used all of it to build a version of himself I'd never think to question. I wish I could say the change happened suddenly, that there was a moment I could point to where the mask slipped and I knew. But it didn't happen like that. It was slow, like erosion. Little comments that made me doubt myself. Half-truths followed by apologies. Plans that got canceled last minute. Stories that didn't quite line up. Nothing dramatic. Nothing big enough to set off alarms. Just small shifts. Small inconsistencies. Moments I chalked up to stress or bad timing, or maybe even me being too sensitive. Because that's what he wanted. He didn't want to control me with fear. He wanted to confuse me with doubt. And the worst part? It worked. For a while, it really worked. The thing about gaslighting, real gaslighting, is that it never feels obvious when you're in the middle of it. It sneaks up on you. And it doesn't start with someone calling you crazy to your face. It starts with doubt. At first, it was little things. I'd mention a conversation we had, something small, something normal, and Marcus would look at me like I'd just made it up. I never said that. Or, you must have misunderstood me. Sometimes he'd even laugh, like it was funny that I remembered things so differently. And because these weren't big fights or dramatic situations, I didn't question it. I told myself maybe I had misheard. Maybe I was reading too much into things. That's how it starts. Little seeds planted slowly, until you find yourself second-guessing things you know for a fact actually happened. It wasn't just words either. He started pulling back in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. Canceling plans. Taking longer to respond to texts. Being busy, all the time but somehow never really telling me what he was so busy doing. And when I asked, the response was always the same. Calm. Casual. I told you about that already. You knew I had plans. You really need to work on listening. It's embarrassing to admit now how quickly I started questioning myself. Because I've never been the forgetful one. I'm the person who remembers birthdays, who knows what day we talked about dinner, who keeps track of the little stuff most people don't notice. But somehow, with Marcus, I found myself apologizing for things I didn't do. Apologizing for asking normal questions. Apologizing for feeling confused. That's when I knew something wasn't right. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in that deep, sinking way where your gut knows long before your heart is ready to catch up. Something about Marcus didn't add up. And whatever it was, I had a feeling I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. It didn't take long before the little things started turning into bigger things. Marcus had this way of making every uncomfortable situation feel like it was somehow my fault. And not in an obvious, aggressive way either. That would have been easy to spot. It was more subtle than that, so subtle that I almost didn't notice how often I found myself confused in my own relationship. If I brought up something that hurt my feelings, he'd spin it. If I caught him in an inconsistency, he'd smile and tell me I was overthinking. I'd point out that he never mentioned a night out, one I only found out about because someone posted a picture. And suddenly I was keeping tabs on him. He turned simple conversations into landmines. Things I knew we talked about, dinner plans, a weekend trip, even what time he said he'd be home, somehow disappeared. He was always so calm about it too. Like I was the only one in the world making life harder than it needed to be. You need to stop stressing over every little thing, he told me once, after I asked why he hadn't called me back for 6 hours. 6 hours. And I sat there wondering if maybe he was right. Maybe I was stressing too much. Maybe I was expecting too much. That's the danger of people like Marcus. They don't come in swinging. They come in slowly, wrapping you up in a version of reality where you can't tell what's normal anymore. And because I loved him, because I trusted him, I let it slide. Not all at once. Not blindly. But enough. Enough to start doubting myself. Enough to stay quiet when I should have spoken louder. Enough to stay longer than I should have stayed. Because people like Marcus don't just lie to you. They teach you how to lie to yourself too. What I didn't know, at least not at first, was that Marcus wasn't just gaslighting me behind closed doors. He was rewriting the story for everyone else too. While I was sitting in our apartment trying to make sense of what was happening between us, he was out laying the groundwork. To friends. To his coworkers. Even to some of mine. He was telling a version of events where I wasn't confused or hurt. I was unstable. I wasn't struggling, I was paranoid. I wasn't asking questions, I was causing drama. And he did it so quietly that by the time I realized what was happening, the damage was already done. I'd walk into a room and feel it. That shift in energy. That silence that follows your presence, like people had just been talking about you, but didn't expect you to show up. There was this one time I came to a mutual friend's birthday party. Something I almost didn't go to, but I was trying to keep the peace. And the second I arrived, the host gave me this tight, fake smile. Then she pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home, her voice low, like she was being gentle with someone fragile. And I realized then people didn't just believe Marcus. They wanted to believe him, because it was easier to trust the calm, smiling man than the woman who'd started pulling back. Easier to side with the guy who shrugged and said, "She's just been under a lot of stress," than to sit with the possibility that maybe the woman wasn't overreacting. Maybe she was just tired of being lied to. That was when I understood I wasn't just losing Marcus. I was slowly being pushed out of my own life. And the worst part, he never once raised his voice. He never had to. He just told the story first and let the silence do the rest. I wish I could say there was one big, dramatic moment that broke me. Something obvious. Something public. But that's not how it happened. With Marcus, the breaking point wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It came like everything else he did, slow, quiet, and deliberate. It happened on a night that should have been nothing. We were supposed to meet for dinner after work. Nothing fancy. Just a casual meal at a little spot we'd gone to a dozen times before. I texted him to confirm like I always did, and like always, he told me he was running late. But something about it sat wrong. I couldn't explain it, couldn't point to any proof, but I knew. So I went anyway. And when I walked into that restaurant, already bracing for whatever excuse he had lined up, I didn't find Marcus sitting alone. He wasn't there with a coworker. He wasn't sitting at the bar scrolling through his phone. He was sitting at a back table with another woman. Close. Laughing. Relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. And the worst part wasn't even that he was on a date. It was the look on his face when he saw me standing there. Not shock. Not guilt. Just calm. Like he'd planned for me to see him. Like he wanted me to react. Wanted me to make a scene. Wanted me to prove to whoever she was, and anyone else who might have been watching, that I was the unstable, overreacting girlfriend he'd told everybody about. That was the moment everything clicked for me. It wasn't just about lies anymore. It wasn't about avoiding conversations or escaping accountability. Marcus was setting me up. Piece by piece, he was building a version of me that looked unhinged. And that night, that's when I decided I wasn't giving him what he wanted. If he thought I was crazy, he was about to find out just how calm a woman could be when she stopped caring about appearances and started caring about receipts. After that night, everything changed. But not in the way Marcus thought it would. He probably expected me to lose it, to yell, to cry, to embarrass myself in the middle of that restaurant and give him exactly the performance he'd been setting me up for. But I didn't. I left. Quietly. I walked right past him, past the woman sitting across from him, past whatever story he was about to tell about me next. And when I got home, I didn't rage text him or blow up his phone. I didn't go on social media. I didn't call friends looking for sympathy. I sat in my apartment, in that quiet space where clarity starts to settle in, and I made a decision. If Marcus wanted to paint me as crazy, I wasn't going to argue with him. I wasn't going to play defense in a story he was writing without me. What I was going to do, carefully, calmly, patiently, was collect the truth. Because the thing about people like Marcus is that they never expect you to stop reacting. They count on the fact that you'll stay emotional, stay loud, stay predictable. They don't know what to do with silence. They don't know what to do with someone who steps back, watches, and waits. And so that's exactly what I did. I started paying attention, not just to what he was saying, but to what he was doing. I stopped letting little things slide. Every inconsistency, I saved it. Every weird text, screenshot. Every lie he told that didn't line up with something he'd said before, noted. I wasn't waiting for him to confess. I wasn't waiting for him to fall apart. I was building a timeline, piece by piece, proof by proof. Because when the time came, I didn't want a screaming match. I wanted receipts. And Marcus had no idea that I was already collecting every single one. Once I started paying attention, it was honestly shocking how sloppy Marcus really was. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't think he had to. He was so used to controlling the story, so used to me second-guessing myself, that it never even occurred to him that I might stop playing along. And once I stopped reacting emotionally, once I stopped questioning him and started documenting everything instead, I saw everything more clearly than I ever had before. It wasn't just about the other woman at the restaurant. It was patterns. The late-night work meetings that didn't line up. The receipts for bars and dinners when he claimed he was home early. Phone calls that disconnected the second I walked into the room. Little things. Things most people wouldn't catch. But I wasn't most people anymore. I stopped trying to catch him red-handed in the moment. Instead, I let him talk. I let him spin whatever version of reality he was comfortable with, while I quietly built my own. I took pictures of text threads, saved voice notes, forwarded emails to myself just in case he ever tried to delete them. And I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not friends, not family, not even the people who'd quietly asked me if things were okay. Because I didn't want backup. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't need validation. I needed proof. Proof that would speak louder than any story Marcus had told about me behind my back. Proof that didn't require me to yell or cry or fight. Just facts. Clean. Simple. Undeniable. And the thing about facts is, they don't need an audience to be powerful. They just need to exist. And I had more than enough. By the time I was done gathering everything, I didn't feel like a woman falling apart. I felt like a woman standing in the middle of a house she didn't build, holding the blueprints to every single lie that man ever told. When the opportunity finally came, I didn't plan some big confrontation. It just sort of fell into place. Marcus's sister was having a small get-together. Nothing fancy, just a birthday dinner with family and a few mutual friends. He wanted me there, of course. Probably thought it would look suspicious if I didn't show up. Or maybe he thought enough time had passed that I'd cooled down, forgotten things, gone back to normal. But I hadn't forgotten. And I definitely hadn't cooled down. I just hadn't reacted the way he expected me to. So when I walked in that night, I didn't come carrying anger. I came with something a lot heavier. Proof. I waited until after dinner. Let people eat, laugh, drink, enjoy themselves. I made small talk. Smiled when I needed to. Watched Marcus do his usual thing. Being overly charming, overly polite, putting on a show for people who still believed he was the good guy. And then, when everyone was finally settled in the living room, I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply said there were a few things I needed to clear up, not just for myself, but for everyone who'd been told a story that wasn't true. And then I passed out the evidence. Printed screenshots. Voicemails. Photos. Dates and times and contradictions. No commentary. No accusations. Just facts. Marcus tried to laugh it off at first, made a few jokes, shrugged, tried to act like I was being extra. But the room got quiet. People stopped smiling. And I could see it. That moment when the story he'd told started unraveling in front of the very people he'd convinced. He couldn't control the room anymore. The truth was doing the talking now. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel crazy. I felt clear. And that was all I'd wanted from the beginning. Once the truth was out there, things shifted fast. Not in a dramatic, screaming match kind of way. There wasn't a huge blow-up or people flipping tables. It was quieter than that. And honestly, that's what made it better. Because loud arguments come and go. But silence? Silence stays. That night, nobody looked at Marcus the same way. He tried to laugh. Tried to talk through it. Tried to act like the things I laid out in front of everyone were somehow old news or misunderstood. But nobody was buying it. You could feel it in the room. That uncomfortable stillness when people start realizing they've been lied to. That slow sinking feeling when the mask finally slips and the person sitting next to you isn't who you thought they were. It was in the way people sat back from him on the couch just a little. The way his sister's smile faded completely. The way his best friend, the one who used to defend him no matter what, didn't say a single word. And Marcus? He could feel it too. He didn't yell. He didn't apologize. But his eyes kept darting around the room like he was looking for someone, anyone, to jump in and save him. But nobody did. Because when people finally see the truth laid out in front of them, they stop defending the lie. After that night, it didn't take long for the rest of his life to catch up with him. People distanced themselves. The little rumors he'd spread about me got quieter. Friends stopped texting him back. And that easy charm he'd used for so long just stopped working. Because now everyone knew. Not because I shouted. Not because I caused a scene. But because the truth didn't need me to fight for it. It just needed to be seen. And after that, Marcus was exactly who he'd always been. The only difference was, now, everybody else knew it too. It's funny. When I look back now, I don't feel anger the way I thought I would. You'd think after everything Marcus put me through, the lies, the gaslighting, the way he went out of his way to twist the story, I'd feel this huge rush of satisfaction watching his life slowly fall apart. But that's not really what stayed with me. What stayed with me was the peace. Not loud, not flashy, just quiet peace. Because for the longest time, Marcus tried to convince everyone that I was crazy. And maybe for a while, I even started to believe it. Not because I was actually unstable, but because when you're surrounded by people treating you like a problem, it's easy to start questioning your own reality. But here's what I learned, and what I'll never forget. Crazy was never the problem. Crazy was never even the point. People like Marcus call you crazy when they're afraid of what happens if you stay calm long enough to collect the truth. They want you reactive. They want you messy, because it makes it easier to discredit everything you say. But silence, patience, proof, that's what they can't survive. And in the end, I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg people to believe me. I didn't need revenge. I needed clarity. And once I had that, Marcus didn't just lose me. He lost every version of me he thought he could control. He lost the story. He lost the room. And the best part, I walked away with everything he never expected me to have. My peace, my dignity, and my own voice. Untouched, unbothered, and finally free.
Chapter 1, The Party. The night started like every other company party: overpriced hors d'oeuvres, awkward jazz covers, and people pretending they weren't checking Slack under the table. Claire stood out the moment we walked in. Not just because she looked incredible, although she did, but because she didn't try to impress anyone. She was confident, curious, quick with her smile. She asked questions like she actually wanted to know the answers. And for a company full of people who talked mostly about themselves, that made her magnetic. Everyone noticed. Including Nigel. He didn't come over at first. Just watched from across the rooftop, swirling his whiskey like he was too important to engage with anyone outside his chosen circle. But by the time Claire was on her second drink, he drifted our way. "Evan," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You didn't tell me your fiancé was the real star of the team." I smiled. Claire smiled. But something about the way he looked at her made my spine itch. He turned to her. "Claire, right? You work in architecture?" She nodded. "Interior design. Mostly commercial spaces these days." Nigel's smile widened, the exact kind he used in investor meetings when he smelled money. "Ah, that explains the posture. Creative and sharp. Dangerous combination." Claire laughed politely. I felt her hand tighten slightly around mine. Nigel didn't notice. Or maybe he did. He kept talking. Kept asking questions. Claire answered, gracious as always. But every so often, his eyes lingered just a second too long. Like he was cataloging her. Like he was imagining something. Later that night, as we walked to the car, Claire slipped off her heels and exhaled. "Your boss is intense." I laughed. "That's the generous version." She paused. "He kept calling me elegant. Like, 3 times. I looked over. "He did?" She nodded. "And he asked if we were really getting married in the fall. Like he was testing it." I frowned. "That's weird." "Yeah," she said quietly. "It was." We didn't talk about it again that night. We ordered Thai, watched half a movie, and fell asleep on the couch like nothing had happened. But 2 days later, when my name went missing from the top of a shared deck I'd spent 3 weeks building, and Nigel told me it was probably just a formatting error, I felt something shift. Something small. But sharp. Chapter 2, Offhand, Revised. I didn't say anything the first time. When my name vanished from the project deck, I assumed it was a formatting error. That's what Nigel called it, anyway. "Probably just a versioning issue," he said, breezy as ever. "Happens when there's too many cooks in the dock." He flashed a grin. That polished, easy smile he gave when he wanted you to know he was too important to worry about details. "We all know it was your work, Evan. Don't sweat the credits." I told myself not to. Really, I did. But 2 days later, I was sitting in a review session when another slide came up, one I'd written line by line, from the campaign hook to the data-backed insight. And once again, no mention of me. Nigel presented it like he'd built it himself. Flipped through the structure I'd crafted, told a story I'd spent hours refining. I waited for the handoff, the nod, even just a glance in my direction. Nothing. When the call ended, I stared at the screen for a while. Then I opened the document history. My comments were there. My name. My markup. Then, a final edit at 12:46 a.m. the night before the meeting, from Nigel's account. That version had no attribution tags at all. I mentioned it to him later, quietly, like I was trying not to make a big deal out of it. He just shrugged. You know how it is. Too many names muddies the message. Then he asked how Claire was. Just like that. Total pivot. She's good, I said, not sure where the conversation was going. Nigel leaned against the counter, hands in his pockets, and gave me this look, the kind that made you feel like he was sizing you up for something you didn't know you were auditioning for. She's got presence, he said. That rare mix, elegance without pretense. Most people either try too hard or disappear. She doesn't. I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to. You're lucky, he added. Some guys marry for comfort. You? You're marrying for power. There was a pause. A long one. Then he smiled again, as if what he just said was perfectly normal. I nodded, said something bland about being grateful, and walked back to my desk. But the moment stuck. That tone. The way he said it. Like Claire wasn't a person to him, just a prize. A rung on a ladder. A variable in an equation he was already solving for. And suddenly, I couldn't stop hearing her voice from the night of the party. He asked if we were really getting married in the fall. At the time, it felt weird. Now it felt like a test. Chapter 3, Ghost Credits. I didn't expect to be thanked in front of the whole team. But I didn't expect to be erased, either. We were in the middle of the monthly department meeting, a standing room only kind of call where Nigel loved to perform, to show off strategy wins and bask in applause for decisions he hadn't made alone. This month's highlight? The internal brand refresh I'd spent 6 weeks building. I watched from my desk as the keynote played, slide after slide, language I had written, visuals I had helped shape, metrics I'd pulled with my own queries. Nigel stood at the front of the room, narrating every step like it was his own blueprint. Not once did he say my name. Not once. At first, I thought maybe he'd mention me at the end. A closing shout out. A quick, and props to Evan for shepherding this through. But the deck ended. People clapped. Someone whistled. And Nigel just smiled. Great work, team, he said. This is what happens when we stay focused and hungry. I didn't even have time to stand up before people started filing out, talking about weekend plans and code freeze deadlines like none of it mattered. Later that afternoon, I pulled up the doc history again, not because I needed proof, but because I needed to see if I was losing it. I wasn't. Every timestamp aligned. Every comment traceable. My name was in the metadata, baked into every iteration of the deck. Until the final upload. I found the edit, buried in the asset library. Last saved by Nigel. One version only. I sat there in silence for a long time. Not angry. Not yet. Just stunned. And then, as if on cue, a message popped up in Slack. From Nigel? Hope you're not feeling sidelined today, the work spoke for itself. Don't worry, the right people know where it came from. The right people. That phrase echoed in my head like a warning. Because it didn't mean credit. It meant control. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like I was being pulled out of my own story, one version edit at a time. Chapter 4, The Complaint. The email came in on a Thursday afternoon, just before I shut my laptop for the night. No subject line. No explanation. Just a calendar invite, check in with Priya, 15 minutes. HR. My stomach tightened before I even clicked it. The invite had been forwarded by Nigel's assistant. No message. No context. I stared at it for a few seconds, rereading the time like it might change. Claire was across the room, balancing a shoe in one hand and a jacket in the other. We had dinner plans. I'd already promised I wouldn't check my phone while we were out. But she saw my face before I said a word. "What's wrong?" she asked, pausing in the hallway. I turned the screen toward her. "HR wants to talk." Her brow furrowed. "About what?" I shrugged, too fast. "No clue. Just says check in." She didn't say anything right away. Just stood there, one shoe on, eyes narrowing slightly like she was trying to solve something she didn't have all the pieces to yet. "You think it's real?" she asked. "Like, routine?" "Could be," I said, trying to sound casual. "Pulse check, maybe? Or a project thing." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. The call was the next day. Priya logged on first, already smiling, the kind of polished HR smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Hi Evan," she said warmly. "Thanks for making time. Shouldn't take long." "Of course," I said, sitting up straighter. "Everything okay?" She gave me a small nod, glancing down at her notes, visible enough to let me know she was working from a script. "There've been some informal concerns raised," she began, "around communication patterns. A few mentions of tone, reactivity, interpersonal dynamics." Her voice was gentle. Too gentle. Like she was trying not to wake something. I blinked. "From who?" "I can't disclose that," she said smoothly. "But it was flagged at the leadership level." There it was. Leadership. "Nigel." I kept my face still, though my fingers tensed slightly against the edge of the desk. She continued. "Nothing formal. No investigation. Just an opportunity to calibrate expectations. See where support might be helpful." Calibrate. The word stuck like gum to the inside of my skull. I leaned forward slightly. "Are there specific examples I can speak to? I'd like to address anything directly." Priya smiled again, sympathetic, practiced. "This isn't disciplinary. Think of it as proactive support." Support. That was what they called it when someone was getting quietly edged out. The call ended with polite pleasantries. I thanked her for the feedback. She thanked me for being open. We both pretended it meant nothing. Then I sat in the silence of my home office and listened to the faint tick of the wall clock, the sound of life continuing outside the frame of that conversation. 15 minutes passed before I moved. When I finally emerged, Claire was on the couch, flipping through her phone, a mug of something warm already waiting on the table beside my seat. I sat down. She didn't ask right away. Just waited. After a moment, I said it. "Do you think he's trying to push me out?" Claire didn't speak immediately. When she did, her voice was steady. Measured. "I think he wants something he can't have," she said. "And he's trying to make you the problem instead of himself." I didn't argue. She leaned forward, picked up a small leather-bound notebook from the coffee table, and held it out. "What's this?" "Your backup," she said. "Start writing everything down. Don't keep it on your work laptop. And don't trust version control." That was the moment it stopped being a coincidence. That night, I backed up every message. Saved every calendar ping. Exported metadata and mirrored my entire drive. Because I wasn't just being paranoid anymore. I was being erased, and if I didn't move fast, I wouldn't even have proof that I'd ever existed. Chapter 5, The DM. We were brushing our teeth when Claire said it. I didn't want to say anything before, but he messaged me. I turned toward her, slowly. "Nigel?" She met my eyes in the mirror and nodded, quiet. It was after that rooftop party. Maybe 2 days later. It showed up in my Instagram DMs. I thought it was weird. I still do. I set down my toothbrush. "What did he say?" Claire rinsed her mouth and leaned on the counter. He said he'd been thinking about our conversation. That I had an elegant presence. And he hoped I hadn't felt too crowded by the energy that night. I stared at her. He sent that out of nowhere? He called it a follow-up, she said. Like we had some kind of unfinished thread. Then he said something about noticing real potential in people, personally and professionally. I felt a slow heat rise in my chest. Did you reply? No. She didn't even hesitate. I deleted it. Didn't want to fan the flame. I figured it was just posturing. Did he ever message again? Claire hesitated, just for a second. He liked a few of my photos. Scrolled way back. Nothing else. Jesus. I pushed off the wall, started pacing across the room. The dots were connecting too clearly now, his tone, the sudden undermining at work, that calibration meeting. Nigel wasn't acting out of insecurity. He was strategizing. And he asked if we were really getting married, I said aloud, the memory snapping into sharper focus. He wanted to know if it was serious. Claire nodded. Yeah. That line rattled me too. I looked at her. Why didn't you tell me earlier? She exhaled. Because I didn't want to add pressure. I thought maybe I'd misread it. That I was being paranoid. My voice dropped. You weren't. She stepped toward me, her voice low and certain. Evan, I don't think this is the first time he's done this. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? Something about the way he acted. It felt practiced. Like he knew how far to push. How to test for a reaction without leaving a footprint. We stood in silence for a beat. Then Claire added, whatever he's doing, it's not new. He's done it before. And you're just the latest version of the story. Chapter 6, A Look Back. The name came from a comment thread. I was up late one night, sitting in the dim glow of my laptop, spiraling through forums for people burned by corporate sabotage, not exactly my usual reading material. But after everything Claire told me, I couldn't sleep. I needed to know if someone else had seen Nigel's pattern. That's when I saw it. A thread titled When Your Boss Gets Personal, and You Can't Prove It. Buried inside was a story. Vague. No company names. Just fragments. He started with small slights, edits that erased me, meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. Then he got friendly with my girlfriend. Said he could mentor her. Offered to review her portfolio. I left quietly. Everyone thought I was unstable. That's what he wanted. The post was signed off with just a first name, Maya. I sat up straighter, heart thudding. I ran a reverse search through LinkedIn, cross-referencing Maya with Nigel's old employer. Only two came up with shared history. One was in finance. The other? A UX lead. Smart. Articulate. Her profile said she left the company 3 years ago to rebuild. I sent a message. Didn't expect a reply. But 2 days later, she responded. You're not the first person to ask me about Nigel. That should tell you something. We set up a call. Maya didn't waste time with pleasantries. Let me guess, she said. Your fiancé caught his attention. Now your job's evaporating by the week? Pretty much. She let out a soft laugh, bitter and familiar. Yeah. Been there. What did he do to you? Started subtle. Took credit for things. Changed my slide decks. Told people I was struggling with bandwidth. She paused. Then he offered to mentor my girlfriend. Invited her to a design panel he was hosting. Started emailing her directly. I didn't even know until she showed me the messages. I was quiet. The room felt colder than it had a minute ago. Maya continued, the worst part wasn't what he did. It was how no one believed me. Everyone thought I was exaggerating. Emotional. Unstable. She made air quotes with her fingers. I left before it turned into a formal write-up. He didn't even have to push. Just let the damage speak for itself. I leaned forward. Do you have anything? Emails, messages, documentation? I kept some things, she said. But I didn't fight it back then. I should have. I thought walking away was the cleanest option. I nodded, already feeling the burn of recognition. He's doing the same thing to me. Maya exhaled. Then you better do what I didn't. Document everything. And don't wait for someone else to step in. He counts on that. When we ended the call, I sat staring at my screen, heart still pounding. Maya hadn't just confirmed what I feared. She'd handed me the start of a paper trail, a pattern. A playbook. And now that I knew the game, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to find a way to win it. Chapter 7, The Audit. It started with a folder no one was supposed to look twice at. It lived deep in the shared drive under a string of auto-generated labels, the kind of naming convention only IT or a desperate strategist would ever bother digging through. But that night, I was both. The pitch had gone well. Too well. Nigel had presented it with his usual flair, brushing past strategy slides like they'd emerged from thin air. And the internal postmortem was already being framed as one of his cleanest wins of the quarter. Except, something didn't add up. The brand language he'd used, the theme of functional transparency, wasn't just familiar. It was mine. Every sentence had been lifted directly from the doc I'd sent him 3 nights earlier. I'd spent hours massaging the phrasing, refining the positioning for the client's notoriously skeptical C-suite. And now it was being showcased like a spontaneous brainchild from Nigel himself. I pulled up the shared deck. On the surface, it was clean. No track changes, no comments, just a finalized PDF uploaded from his account. But something made me dig deeper. I checked the file's edit history, not through Google Docs, but through the SharePoint backend. It was a long shot, but sometimes metadata survives negligence. This time, it did. Inside the campaigns _Q2 folder, tucked under a subfolder labeled Miscellaneous Drafts, I found it. The original deck. Unlocked. With version history still intact. I clicked through, watching it rebuild itself layer by layer. There was my phrasing. There were my comments. And there, clear as day, was the timestamped moment Nigel deleted the line at the bottom of slide 3. Strategy, Evan Marks. Not commented out. Not replaced. Just gone. Like it had never existed. I sat there, jaw clenched, heartbeat loud in my ears. This wasn't just oversight. This was a pattern. Intentional. Precise. A surgical erasure that left just enough behind to cover his tracks, unless someone knew where to look. I took screenshots. Saved local copies. Exported version logs with embedded timestamps. Claire helped me organize it all into a mirrored archive that night. Clean folder structure. Secure drive. Offline backup. It felt like building a bunker. At first, I told myself it was insurance. Documentation. Something to bring to HR if things escalated. But then the message came from Jonah. He was the project manager on the client side, sharp, perceptive, someone I'd collaborated with during a pilot campaign last year. I hadn't been on the client call this time. Nigel had said the team was streamlined for efficiency. But that morning, Jonah pinged me on Slack. Hey man, great work on the campaign. Nigel said you spearheaded the strategy. Good to see you behind it again. I blinked at the screen. He said that? I typed back, cautious. Yeah, said you ran point, just weren't on the call 'cause you were stacked. Either way, solid stuff. I stared at the message for a full minute. So Nigel had claimed me in private to the client, because he knew he needed my credibility, while simultaneously cutting me out of visibility internally. He was building himself up using my ideas while positioning me as an unreliable, overextended shadow. He didn't want me fired. Not yet. He wanted me invisible. Until he didn't need me anymore. That realization hit harder than I expected. I showed Claire the thread that night. She read it twice, lips pressed together in that way she did when she was working through something she couldn't quite say. Then she looked up and said, "He's not just trying to erase you, Evan. He's trying to split you in half." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He wants you credible enough to be useful, but unstable enough to be replaceable." I leaned back in my chair. That was it. That was the strategy. Credit in the shadows. Discredit in the light. "You realize," Claire added, "you've already started fighting back. You just haven't aimed yet." She was right. I had receipts. Versions. Eyewitnesses. Patterns. I didn't need to wonder if something was happening anymore. Now, I just needed a way to bring the right eyes to it. And to make sure that when the story came out, it wouldn't just be his version they heard. Chapter 8, Neutral Eyes. It was Claire who said the word first. "Attorney." I had just finished showing her the full documentation trail, the version histories, the Slack threads, the call logs. We were sitting on the couch, laptop open between us, lit only by the screen and the steady pulse of the streetlight through the window. "I don't want to sue him," I said. "You might not have to," she replied. "But you need someone who understands how this works. Someone who sees through the gaslight before it's burning." She was right, again. But I still hesitated. I wasn't afraid of lawyers. I was afraid of how it would look. I'd spent years building a reputation as calm, steady, rational. Not litigious. Not reactive. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated dismantling. And the only thing worse than being the guy who cried sabotage, was being the guy who stayed quiet and got buried. So I reached out to a former colleague, someone I'd worked with back when I was freelancing, Camille James, now in-house counsel at a tech firm 2 cities over. Smart. Tactical. Discretion was her specialty. We met for coffee on neutral ground, a nondescript cafe on a side street near her office. I laid it out slowly, carefully. The campaign theft. The version deletions. The Slack messages. The HR calibration. Claire's story. Maya's. Camille listened, barely interrupting. Just nodded, occasionally taking a note in a little flipbook she kept tucked behind her phone. When I was done, she tapped her pen against the paper once, then looked up. "This is coordinated," she said. "Deliberate and strategic. And if you keep waiting, you're going to find yourself cornered with no credibility left." I swallowed. "So what do I do?" "First," she said, "you stop thinking like an employee. Start thinking like a case." She outlined the basics. Documentation I already had. Dates to lock down. Instances where third-party attribution could support my claims, emails from clients, team messages, metadata logs. But the most important piece? "I need you to talk to someone inside," she said. "Not just Claire. Someone at the company. Someone who's seen what's happening but hasn't said anything yet." "Like who?" Camille's eye sharpened. "You know who. You just haven't asked yet." And I did. The name was already in my mind before she finished the sentence. Devon. Quiet, capable. A mid-level analyst who'd worked on every strategy deck I'd ever built, and who'd stopped making eye contact with me 2 weeks ago. If anyone had seen Nigel's version control in real time, it was him. But the question wasn't whether Devon knew. It was whether he'd be willing to talk before it was too late. Chapter 9, Devon's Line. I waited until nearly everyone had cleared out for the day. It was past 6 when I saw Devon still at his desk, earbuds in, tapping out something in Excel with that deep focus look he always had when he was trying not to hear the noise around him. I didn't approach right away. I watched him for a minute, wondering how much he already knew. Wondering if this conversation would flip a switch. Or just confirm that the whole office had already picked a side. Eventually, I stepped in front of his desk. He looked up, startled. Pulled one earbud out. "Hey," I said quietly. "Can I borrow 5 minutes?" Devin glanced around. The place was mostly empty now, except for 2 engineers at the back and someone rustling through the snack drawer. "Yeah," he said after a second. "Yeah, sure." We walked to one of the unused glass conference rooms. I didn't sit. Neither did he. I kept it simple. Honest. "I think you've seen what's been happening," I said. "The version changes. The credit shifting. The stuff that disappears after hours." Devin's face didn't change. But he didn't deny it either. "I'm not trying to drag you into something," I said. "But I need to know, am I crazy? Or is this real?" That's when he finally spoke. "You're not crazy," he said, voice low. "I've seen it." The air left my lungs like a slow exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. Devin looked at the floor. I didn't know what to do. "He's careful. Everything feels like a shrug or a miscommunication. But yeah. I've seen your name stripped off documents. Seen him edit things after you log off. And there was that one time." He stopped himself. I stepped closer. "What time?" He hesitated. "Then, the Q1 deck? The sustainability strategy piece. He had me stay late to reformat it. Told me not to touch the structure, just change fonts and spacing. But when I opened the file, your version was right there, in the history. All of it." I nodded slowly. "Did you save it?" I asked. He looked up. "I made a PDF. I didn't even know why at the time. Just felt wrong." "You still have it?" He nodded. "Yeah. It's on my personal drive." That drive, that file, could be the tipping point. A third-party witness. A version saved outside the company system. Something Nigel couldn't quietly disappear. "Devin," I said carefully, "I'm not asking you to take sides. But if this keeps going, I could lose my job. And he won't stop. Not until he burns through everyone." Devin looked at me for a long second. Then he said, "I'll send it tonight." That was the moment I knew, I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The silence was breaking. The story was starting to shift. And Nigel? He had no idea it was already unraveling from the inside. Chapter 10, The Whistle. The PDF from Devin landed in my inbox at 9:03 p.m. It wasn't just a backup. It was a time capsule, a time-stamped copy of the Q1 deck, with metadata that placed its creation firmly before Nigel's final version. My phrasing. My formatting. My entire strategy flow, untouched. At the bottom of one slide. Draft reviewed by Evan Marks, March 12, 11:48 p.m. And right there in the file properties. Last saved by Devin Elkins. I stared at the screen for a long time, the silence in our apartment thick with the kind of tension that comes before a strike. Claire stood behind me, arms crossed, watching. "You have him," she said. "In his own game." "Almost," I replied. Because one file wasn't enough. I needed leverage. I needed context. And, if I was going to survive this, I needed someone inside HR who would actually listen. Not Priya. Elena Cross. The VP of People Ops. Quiet. Calculated. A level above the political games Nigel liked to play. She didn't do friendly coffee chats or emoji-laced check-ins. She operated in tone, timing, and silence. But she also had one reputation that mattered more than anything: she hated cover-ups. I'd only spoken to her directly twice. Both times during leadership trainings. Both times, she remembered exactly who I was. So I sent her a message. Short. Specific. Clocked at 9:47 p.m. "Elena, I know you don't get involved in every dispute. but I'm requesting a confidential discussion about escalating retaliation that may involve data manipulation and interference with client deliverables. This is bigger than personality friction. I have documentation. Please advise how to proceed. It took exactly 12 minutes. Her reply: come by my office. Tomorrow. 7:30 a.m. before anyone else arrives. Claire was still standing behind me when I read it. She placed her hand on my shoulder. You okay? No, I admitted. But this is the first time I felt like I might be. The next morning, I walked into the office before the lights even fully flickered on. No coffee. No headphones. Just a folder under my arm and a line drawn in the sand. Elena's office was on the top floor, the only one with real glass, not a film overlay. She opened the door herself. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask why I'd reached out. She just nodded at the chair. Show me. I sat down and opened the folder. By the time I finished, she hadn't said a single word. But her posture had shifted. She was no longer leaning back, she was forward, focused. Her fingers steepled, brows drawn. I'm going to ask you something blunt, she said. Go ahead. Are you planning to sue? I met her eyes. Not unless I have to. But I'm not going down quietly. Elena nodded once. Understood. Then she tapped the PDF twice with her pen and said something that changed everything. You're not the only one who's come to me about him. But you're the first who brought receipts. Chapter 11, The Ice Cracks. Nigel didn't speak to me all day. Which wouldn't have meant much. If it weren't for the way he looked at me when I passed him in the hallway around noon. The glance was sharp. Fleeting. But unmistakable. He knew. I didn't say anything. Just nodded, professional. Neutral. But something had changed. His grip on the wheel wasn't as steady anymore. By mid-afternoon, whispers were starting. Not loud. Not accusatory. But curious. People asking about meeting ownership. Wondering why timelines had shifted on shared decks. A subtle rewiring of attention. I didn't feed it. That wasn't my job. But I did stay late, and so did he. I saw his office light on around 7:15, the door cracked just enough for a sliver of tension to bleed into the hallway. His laptop was open. A call in progress. I didn't recognize the voice on the other end, but the tone was urgent. Defensive. I kept walking. The real shift came the next morning. An urgent calendar invite from Elena Cross. Leadership alignment check-in, 8:30 a.m. Nigel was listed as optional. I was not. I arrived 2 minutes early. Elena's office was closed, but her assistant opened it the second I appeared. Elena looked up from her tablet, gestured to the seat opposite her. Thanks for coming. I sat. She didn't waste time. Your documentation checks out? I had it reviewed. I nodded. Thank you. I'm not thanking you, she said, calmly. I'm acknowledging it. She turned the tablet toward me. On the screen was a clean layout of version history logs, formatted, time-stamped, color-coded. My metadata, Devon's file, and a summary memo she'd drafted herself. This will be escalated, she said. Quietly, for now. But formally. I nodded again, slower this time. What does that mean for me? It means you're going to be very, very careful. She tapped the screen again, flipped to a second page. If you want a future here, you'll avoid the temptation to burn it down. Let the process work. I understand. Do you? Her voice sharpened, just slightly. Because Nigel won't go quietly. He'll pivot. He'll gather allies. He'll find other ways to destabilize you. You've drawn blood. Expect retaliation. I swallowed hard. What should I do? Stay visible. Stay clean. And if anything changes, anything, I want it documented immediately. I nodded. Then she said something I didn't expect. He's done this before. But never to someone who fought back this cleanly. I met her eyes. So I'm not the first? No, she said simply. But you might be the last. When I left her office, Nigel was standing 10 feet down the hall, arms folded. He didn't smile. Didn't nod. He just watched me walk past like I'd stepped onto a stage he thought he owned. And I knew right then, he was going to try something. The only question now was what? Chapter 12, The Slip. It happened in a meeting he didn't know I was invited to. A cross-functional review on Q3 projections. Normally, strategy wouldn't even be in the room yet. But Elena had started looping me into everything tied to Nigel's vertical. Quietly. Deliberately. No explanation, no announcement. I walked in 2 minutes early. Nigel was already there, standing at the head of the conference table, sleeves rolled up, posture easy. Performative casual. He was telling a story to a group of junior team leads, something about vision mapping and executive intuition. When he saw me, the story stuttered. His eyes narrowed. He gave a tight, delayed nod. I nodded back and took a seat at the far end of the table. The meeting began, and for the first 20 minutes, it was harmless. Forecasts. Budget slides. Timeline considerations. But then something shifted. Nigel brought up a slide labeled Conceptual Pathways. And I recognized it immediately. It was mine. My structure. My phrasing. My flow. He'd stripped out the branding, rebuilt the color scheme, but the architecture hadn't changed. Not even the subheaders. Intuitive milestones. Fractal messaging. Phrases I'd coined and used exactly once, in a confidential brainstorming file I never shared with him. Except I had. Indirectly. Through a folder his assistant had access to when we worked on a joint proposal 2 months ago. And now. Here it was. I raised my hand. Nigel hesitated. Yes, Evan? Just curious, I said, keeping my tone even. Where did this framework originate? He blinked. Pardon? This slide, I gestured. The structure. The phrasing. Is it from one of our internal decks? I don't see a source citation. His jaw tightened, barely, but it was there. I compiled this version myself, he said coolly. So the original wasn't pulled from any of the shared drafts we submitted during the Atlas review process? Silence. The room was quiet. Not frozen. Not stunned. Just aware. People were watching now. The story was slipping. I'm just asking because I have a copy of this format, timestamped before the Atlas deck even reached design, I said. And it looks identical. Word for word. Nigel gave a slow, practiced smile. We all borrow from each other now and then, don't we? But no one laughed. The slide hung behind him like an accusation. I didn't press further. Didn't have to. The air had already changed. The junior team leads, once so eager to nod along, now shifted in their seats. 2 of them glanced at each other. Someone reached for their phone. The call ended on time. No flare-ups. No yelling. Just a slow descent into unease. But I stayed behind. Nigel waited until the last person left, then turned to me. What's your angle? He asked, voice low. No angle, I said. Just a record. He stepped closer. You think Elena's going to save you? I don't need saving. He leaned in. You're playing a dangerous game. No, I said. You are. I'm just recording the score. For the first time, he looked unsure. Not defeated. Not rattled. But he knew, the grip was slipping. And this time, it wasn't going back. Chapter 13, The Reckoning, Final Version, Now with fire, the all-hands meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. But the shouting started at 3:46. I was sitting at my desk, finalizing notes for the pitch transition plan, the one Elena had quietly handed me, when I heard the muffled thud of something slamming against a wall. A door. Then voices. Then his voice. I built this team. Chairs scraped. Heads turned. I stood and moved to the corner of the floor, just far enough to catch the scene unfolding through the glass hallway outside Elena's office. Nigel was standing in front of her desk, red-faced, arms flailing. His voice punched through the walls, no longer polished, feral. "You're gonna hang me for what, Elena? A few edits? Everyone borrows, everyone tweaks, this is politics, not plagiarism." Elena stood behind her desk, still as stone. 2 security guards were flanking the door, not touching him. Yet. "We gave you a chance to step down quietly," she said, her voice low but somehow cutting through everything. "You declined. Oh, you loved what I delivered. Until the little strategist got in your ear with his sad boy screenshots." He turned, almost sensing me. His eyes scanned the hall. And landed on me. A beat of dead silence. Then he laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound, the kind that doesn't land, just ricochets off glass. "Oh, of course," he spat. "Evan. You really think this makes you the hero? You're just a footnote in my legacy. You got lucky because I underestimated you." I didn't flinch. Didn't move. Just held his gaze. Elena stepped forward. "This isn't a negotiation, Nigel. Your access has been revoked. Your exit paperwork is complete. Security will escort you out now." "No," he said, voice rising again. "I'm not going out like some goddamn pariah. I made this place win. I carried this company for 5 years while you sat upstairs pretending your little HR systems made any difference." He pointed at me again, wild now. "And he's nothing. A-B tier analyst with a file folder and a fiancée who wouldn't even look at him if she knew what he really was." Security stepped in. But Elena raised a hand. And she looked at him like he was already gone. "You always thought people were beneath you," she said. "But you never realized the ones you step on remember everything." Then she turned to the guards. "Walk him out." As they moved in, Nigel's last words weren't shouted, they were hissed. "This place will rot without me." And then the elevator doors closed behind him. The meeting still happened. Elena stood in front of the full team and laid it out, not in PR speak, not in euphemisms. She called it manipulation. She called it theft. And she called it over. Then she turned to me and said, in front of everyone, "Evan Marks will assume lead strategy for our Q4 initiatives effective immediately." The room didn't erupt. It went quiet. The kind of quiet where you realize everyone just witnessed the end of an era, and the start of something else. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel hunted. I felt seen. Epilogue, off the record, final version with restraining order 3 weeks later, the article dropped. Not from our comms team. Not from a vague internal shake-up memo. From Business Cipher, a mid-tier but widely read tech newsletter known for its Savage Monday exposés. Fall from strategy, how one exec's ego became a liability. The story didn't name sources. But it didn't have to. The timeline was airtight. The claims specific. The headline ruthless. Quotes from unnamed staff. A former client noting inconsistencies in deliverables. A paragraph detailing the Q1 deck scandal, including an analyst who mirrored version histories and had the receipts. That line? Claire's favorite. They even included a grainy photo of Nigel leaving our building, escorted, mid-rant, shirt slightly untucked, face contorted. The image had clearly been taken by someone inside the office. It went viral by noon. His LinkedIn went dark by 2. By 3:30, the group chat from our strategy team was flooded with screenshots of Slack messages he'd once sent. The ones with the fake flattery. The circle back gaslights. 1. Read. Don't get emotional about ideas, especially if they weren't yours to begin with. The irony was its own kind of justice. But the final nail came not from the company. It came from the courthouse. After his termination, Nigel tried one last move, a direct message to Claire. A long, rambling wall of text that started with faux concern and spiraled into obsession. You were never safe with him. You know I could have given you more. I saw the way you looked at me that night, don't lie to yourself. He followed it with a forwarded photo from a restaurant we'd been at the week before, taken from across the room. That was the last straw. Claire didn't hesitate. She forwarded the message to our attorney, the same one who'd quietly advised us during the internal investigation. Within 48 hours, legal had the paperwork filed. By the end of the week, we had a restraining order in hand, and confirmation he'd violated 3 internal ethics codes and California labor laws. The best part? That Business Cipher article got an update a few days later. Update: the former executive has since been issued a restraining order following multiple documented attempts to contact the fiancée of a former colleague. A company spokesperson declined to comment. He lost his job. He lost his reputation. And he lost the last illusion that anyone, especially Claire, would ever want him back. 2 days after the article, I got an email. Short. Polite. Subject: inquiry, speaking opportunity. Body: would you be open to speaking on ethical leadership failures for our upcoming panel at the Midwest Strategy Conference? Your story has resonated with a lot of folks in the industry. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I closed the laptop, poured a drink, and walked out to the balcony where Claire was watching the sunset. She looked over and smiled. Someone else asking for the story? I nodded. This time, they want the truth. She clinked her glass against mine. Then tell it. Because Nigel didn't just lose his job. He lost the narrative. And from now on, every time someone Googles his name, my story comes up first.
Being too emotional just means you felt it before they did. And when the proof hit, nobody could ignore it. Subscribe for more stories where they finally saw what you already knew.